In a time beyond time, when the earth was still in its infancy, a magnificent vision of purity hovered over the world. The heavens and the earth intertwined, and the glory of the Creator could be seen in every corner of creation. The firmament, filled with stars, radiated a soft, sparkling light, and man walked in harmony with all of nature. There were no boundaries between the sacred and the earthly. Everything was a perfect reflection of the divine intention. In this setting, angels occasionally descended to observe the masterpiece of God, feeling the depth of the love and wisdom the Lord had poured into the universe. Among these heavenly beings, there was a group that, in a moment of fateful decision, strayed from the path of righteousness and obedience. Scripture would later call them the sons of God. Angels who, drawn by the splendor of creation, developed a deep interest in the humans who inhabited the earth. The first mention of these beings appears in the pages of Genesis, but the words of Scripture are careful, almost as if hiding a dark secret. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Genesis 6, 1-2. The passion of the angels for these women was not merely physical, but also spiritual. They, who had been created to dwell in the heights and serve the Most High, now longed to experience what it was like to live in the flesh, to feel human emotions, and to touch the matter of the mortal world. And so, breaking the boundary that had been imposed upon them, these angels left their heavenly state, descended to earth, and took wives from the daughters of men. But this union was an abomination before God, for it joined the imperishable with the perishable, the eternal with the fleeting. The women who accepted these angels were immediately marked by an intense presence, as if they carried within them the weight of something divine and forbidden. Their pregnancies were abnormal, and the children born of these unions were different, endowed with an enormous stature and strength. These children, known as the Nephilim, grew to become giants among men, but their nature was unstable, and over time it became evident that they were violent and domineering. The Nephilim had none of the limits of a common man. They were cruel and insatiable, with a power that surpassed that of humanity. As the years passed, the Nephilim took the earth for themselves, subjugating ordinary men, building cities and proclaiming themselves as gods. Humanity, once at peace, was plunged into unprecedented chaos. The wickedness of the Nephilim corrupted the entire earth, and the purity that the Creator had implanted in men and women was increasingly tainted by these merciless beings. Those who knew the truth whispered among themselves, questioning what had happened to the sacred balance between heaven and earth. Some ancients said that the heavens wept in sorrow upon seeing the Nephilim dominate the fields, mountains, and cities, for they had broken the divine order. But the fallen angels, who had descended to satisfy their craving for flesh, soon found themselves trapped in the very world they had once only observed. The transgression they had committed no longer allowed them to return to their original state. Now they were bound to the fate of their children and the evil that had spread throughout the world. The corruption of the Nephilim was a reflection of their own fall, a shadow of the lost paradise they could never regain. Thus, while they watched the unchecked growth of their children, they also felt the weight of their condemnation. In the midst of this scene of decay, Noah, a righteous man, walked with God. He was a descendant of the line of Seth, the son of Adam, who had inherited the mantle of faithfulness to the Lord. Noah saw the Nephilim and the fallen angels with fear and sorrow, knowing that their presence was an affront to God's will. It was as if he felt, with every step he took, the heavy presence of the judgment that was to come. And in a night of great anguish, the Lord spoke to him, revealing that the earth had become corrupt and that his spirit would not remain among men forever. "I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created," the Lord said to Noah, "and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them." Genesis 6:7. The divine decision was made, and the fate of the fallen angels and the Nephilim was sealed. In obedience, Noah began to build an ark, a colossal work that served as a symbol of the separation between what was holy and what had been profaned. The narrative of Genesis, though brief, hints at the enormity of the event that was to come. The corruption of the fallen angels and the Nephilim had drawn God's judgment upon all creation, and now the rain from the heavens, which had never fallen before, would flood the earth. While Noah worked tirelessly on the construction of the ark, the earth was teeming with the decay and violence brought about by the Nephilim and the fallen angels. The cities built by these giants were places of opulence and terror, where dark temples stood for gods who were not the Creator. The Nephilim, in their fury and arrogance, saw themselves as immortal gods, disregarding the concept of one true God. Fueled by this illusion, they demanded reverence from the crowds, who were forced to worship their deeds and fear their brutality. Anas, one of the most feared Nephilim, ruled a large region and was known for his enormous strength and cruel intelligence. He manipulated both politics and fear with precision, imposing his dominance not only through physical violence but also through meticulous strategies. Anas had a desire to conquer everything around him, destroying any man, woman, or city that dared to resist. From his stone throne, he watched Noah's progress with curiosity and disdain, not believing that a simple vessel could save a man from the inevitable fate he planned to impose on the world. While the ark took shape, the fallen angels, now stripped of divine glory, increasingly suffered the consequences of their rebellion. Though they had chosen to blend into the world of men, they experienced day by day the decay and weight of their actions. They could no longer hear the voice of the Most High, nor return to the state of light that once enveloped them. Over time, they realized they were trapped in a limited existence where their spiritual abilities weakened and they became more earthly and less celestial. Desperation, once hidden beneath their ambitions, began to take over their hearts, and some even tried unsuccessfully to seek forgiveness. But the divine order had been broken, and there was no turning back. Among them, Azazel, a prominent leader, was the first to understand the extent of the tragedy they had caused. Knowing that judgment was imminent, he gathered the other fallen angels in a remote valley, where they discussed the destruction the Lord had announced. Azazel, who knew God's justice deeply, stated with bitter resignation, "We are condemned, brothers. The Lord will not forget the corruption we have brought to the world, and his wrath will fall upon us like a sword that knows no mercy." Still, the fallen angels tried to find ways to escape the dark fate awaiting them. Seeking a way to protect their children, the Nephilim, some devised complex schemes, calling upon forces they believed could shield them from the flood that seemed inevitable. Others, in one final act of rebellion, taught secrets and skills to men, hoping they could resist the destruction or keep alive the memory of their deeds. But Noah, despite the contempt and threats from the Nephilim, remained steadfast in his mission. His obedience was fueled by solid faith and the voice of God, who guided him in every detail of the construction. As he and his family worked, they faced scornful glances and even attempts of sabotage by the inhabitants of the surrounding cities, many of whom had been seduced by the influence of the Nephilim. They saw Noah as a fool, someone wasting his life on an impossible mission. When the ark was finally completed, an aura of mysticism and fear surrounded the structure. Those who approached felt a weight in their hearts, as if they knew, even subconsciously, that this ark was a manifestation of divine mercy and justice. Then animals of every kind, guided by an invisible force, began to move toward the ark, surprising even the most skeptical. It was a surreal spectacle, and the people, now divided between fear and curiosity, gathered to observe the strange procession, which seemed to signal the end of an era. The fallen angels, seeing that their efforts had been in vain and that judgment was inevitable, withdrew to hiding places in caves and mountains, hoping to escape God's gaze. They knew that destruction would not spare any place on earth, but the instinct to survive pushed them to hide like shadows, attempting to prolong their days. Noah, guided by the Lord, entered the ark with his family. Outside, voices of mockery still echoed, while some screamed that he was abandoning the world in a useless vessel. But when the door of the ark was closed, a deep stillness settled over the region. The sky, once serene, began to fill with dark and heavy clouds, and a cold wind cut through the air, carrying with it the ominous sign of the coming flood. Then came the rain. It began as a fine drizzle, but soon turned into a furious storm, with thunder roaring like a harbinger of destruction. The waters rose, and rivers and lakes overflowed. The crowds who had once mocked now sought shelter, realizing with horror that the flood was real. The Nephilim, once proud and imposing, found themselves powerless against the overwhelming force of the waters. Their cities, temples, and monuments were swallowed up, and they who had seen themselves as invincible fell under the unrelenting hand of divine judgment. The fallen angels, hidden in caves and mountains, also felt the weight of God's wrath, as if every drop of water carried the lament of the innocent creatures who had suffered under their dominion. In their final moments, they experienced the loneliness of a world without the presence of God, an abyss where there was no redemption. Thus, as the waters covered the earth, and the sound of the flood echoed through creation, the Lord beheld the justice fulfilled, knowing that within the depths of that storm, something more than judgment had been accomplished. When the waters finally began to recede, the earth was unrecognizable. What had once been a familiar landscape, with green fields, majestic mountains, and prosperous cities, was now covered by a layer of mud and debris. The flood had not only destroyed the cities of men and the Nephilim, but it had also purified the land of all the corruption that had been introduced. God's judgment, though severe, had the purpose of restoring the order of the world, removing the stains of transgression left behind by the fallen angels and their children, the Nephilim. Inside the ark, Noah and his family spent days and nights, listening to the incessant sound of the waters and feeling the sway of the great vessel that protected them. The darkness around them was complete, but Noah knew that this was a time of waiting. He was aware that, beyond the judgment, there was a divine promise awaiting fulfillment. The covenant God had made with him before the flood remained firm. Noah and his lineage would be the seed of a new humanity, a people who would once again inhabit the earth and live according to the Lord's commandments. The wait inside the ark seemed endless, but Noah's patience was driven by trust in God's words. During this time, he prayed with his family, offering sacrifices of gratitude for their salvation and asking for God's guidance for the days to come. Even in times of uncertainty, Noah never doubted God's purpose, and his faith remained unshaken. The sign that God had promised finally came. After many days, Noah released a raven which flew around the ark but did not return. Then he sent out a dove to see if the waters had subsided. The first time the dove returned, Noah knew that the waters still covered the earth. But on the second occasion, the dove brought back an olive leaf, a clear sign that the land had dried enough for life to begin again. Upon seeing the sign, Noah knew that God's promise was being fulfilled. The Lord spoke to him, saying, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife, your sons and their wives with you." Genesis 8:16. When the door of the ark opened for the first time after the flood, Noah and his family stepped out into the light of a renewed world, where the waters had swept away all corruption, leaving a new creation to be inhabited. But at the same time, Noah knew that humanity had to be cautious, for the heart of man was still inclined toward evil. God then established a new covenant with Noah and his descendants. He gave them an eternal promise, "And I will establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth." Genesis 9:9-11. The covenant was sealed with a visible sign, the rainbow, which appeared in the sky as a constant reminder that judgment would no longer be poured out in such a devastating way. The rainbow, with its vibrant colors, symbolized God's mercy, that he would not destroy the earth in such a manner again. Although the covenant was a sign of renewal and hope, the presence of the Nephilim and the mistakes of the fallen angels still lingered over human history. Sin did not vanish with the flood. It continued to haunt the hearts of men. Noah, now a patriarch in a new world, knew that corruption still resided in the depths of the human soul. Even he, in his faithfulness, would make mistakes in his own time. But in that moment of rebirth, the Lord offered a new beginning, an opportunity for the men and women born of Noah to build a new story under his guidance. The truth that unfolded before Noah and his family was clear. God had purified the land, But now, more than ever, humans needed to choose between life and death, between following the divine order or falling again into corruption. The freedom given to man was great, but it also carried the responsibility to preserve the covenant and the wisdom that the Lord had offered. The story in Genesis, although a tale of great destruction, was also a story of redemption and new beginnings. The mystery of the fallen angels and the Nephilim, though hidden in the scriptures, echoed as a constant reminder that transgression against God brought with it deep and irreversible consequences. Yet, it also showed that divine mercy, even in the face of human failure, was always within reach for those who repented and returned to faithfulness. The cycle of judgment and mercy, represented by the flood and the promise of the rainbow, revealed God's nature, just, yet also compassionate. In the centuries that followed, the story of Noah and the flood would be told and retold, reminding all that evil, though temporary, would be defeated, and that God's justice, though severe, was always balanced by the promise of renewal and hope. Noah's legacy, the seed of a new humanity, would continue to grow, spreading across the earth, while the rainbow with its eternal promise would rise in the sky as a symbol that divine love and restoration would always come for those who believed. The Nephilim, their parents, and the fallen angels would disappear from the narratives of one generation to the next, but their actions and the traces of their influence, like a distant echo, would remain in the stories and hearts of men. After all, the history of humanity would never be completely free from the memory of the transgression that nearly destroyed everything. But in every new generation, whenever a rainbow appeared in the sky, the world would be reminded. Judgment had been fulfilled, and a new opportunity had been given. The final truth was this: the fall of the angels and the Nephilim would not be the end, but only a part of the divine plan that in some way would guide all, through tribulations and challenges, to a deep understanding of God's love and mercy.